comforting, really warm. He was there in high school, and high school's a really bad time for me. Never had a good relationship with food. And when you're kind of a fat kid, no one thinks you have an eating disorder. They look at you and they're like, you can lose a little weight. Adults won't call a kid fat, it makes them feel bad. But if you call a kid a little husky, that's all right. So he was there for that. He was there when I started working. Been in restaurants almost my whole life. Started making pizzas in a skating rink that smelled like socks. Moved on to the kitchen, worked my way up to pastry chef at a little Italian restaurant. We did fresh pasta, we had great desserts. I'm a little biased. But basically it was all carbs. And then one of these days I ended up in a doctor's office because I had really horrible ulcers. And they took a tube that looked like it was way too big to fit anywhere in my body, and they shoved it down my throat. And I don't know if you've ever had an endoscopy, but it's worse than the dentist because you're literally deep-throating a medical device. So he sticks this tube down my throat and he goes, "It looks like you have celiac." And with this tube down my throat, I go, "Oh." But that's what it was. And that May was the last day I ever talked to my ex-boyfriend. His name was Bread. We were super close. If you don't know what celiac is, it's basically whenever I eat a protein called gluten, my small intestine attacks itself. We're not on great terms right now either. The easiest way to describe gluten is that you take your favorite foods and you take everything good out of them. And that's the gluten. It's the pasta, it's the cake, it's soy sauce, and it hides. They can't just put gluten on an ingredient label. Sometimes it's wheat, sometimes it's hydrolyzed triactylate, or modified food starch, whatever that is. So after we broke up, I was left to learn a couple things. Became a food detective. I can read labels now. I also learned that people are really concerned about what I eat. And I've learned this because every time I take one of those $4.99 gluten-free cookies out of the package, and I'm lucky if it comes out in one piece, they tend to explode into dust. Every time I take one out, a small crowd forms around me. And every single one was like, "Oh, can I try that?" You guys, food is love. I can't tell someone, "No, you can't have my food." So they take this tiny little piece of it, and they lay it on their tongue. They're not even really tasting it. But as soon as they get that first little taste, they're like, oh, something's missing. Yeah, it's called gluten, guys. It's what makes life good. The other thing I've learned is that it solves some household problems. For instance, my food has its own pantry. No one takes my food. I can bring a cocktail ring of shrimp to a potluck, and as soon as they learn that the gluten-free girl brought it, no one touches it. It's great. It also solves some household problems. The other day I woke up and someone had forgotten to flush. There's only 2 of us that live in the house. So I go to my wife and I'm like, babe. She's like, "Well, how do you know it wasn't you?" Because I don't have solid poops. It's really simple. The most important thing that being gluten-free has taught me is that food is not my best friend, but it's not my enemy either. So when I was 8, my parents were helping me clean my room, and they found this hoard of junk food wrappers under my bed. And for my family, food is what we planned our vacations around. It was the most important thing. We're not Italian, but we might as well have been Italian. And I couldn't tell them that the reason I had food hidden in my bedroom was because if I ate it in front of them, I felt really guilty. I felt really anxious. And it took all of the joy of eating a Twix bar out of eating a Twix bar. And now that food doesn't make me depressed and anxious all the time, it's a little bit easier to eat, even if it costs 4 times as much. Because one of the side effects of celiac is crushing Eeyore-level depression. It follows you around. And this fun thing called brain fog, which is where you know you're supposed to go to the grocery store and clean the kitty litter box, but really sitting in bed and staring at the wall sounds so much better. That's what's going to make me happy, so that's what I'm going to do. So, while I learned that food is not going to save me from anything or make me feel any better, I've also learned that it's not the enemy. That was my horrible ex-boyfriend.